We've come to that point in the Star Wars saga. It's time to talk about Attack of the Clones. Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, the second prequel in the Star Wars saga, and it is once again written and directed by George Lucas. This movie takes place 10 years after The Phantom Menace, which makes The Phantom Menace pretty much irrelevant. What the opening call of this movie tells us is that there's this group of planets that are trying to leave the Republic because they don't like the way the Republic is running things. They're known as the Separatists. And then more political unrest, more Senate meetings. The main part of this movie, though, is the fact that there was this assassination attempt on Padme. So Anakin, who is now grown up, is assigned with protecting Padme while Obi-Wan goes to investigate this whole assassination thing. This movie tries to be a couple different things, so I'm going to talk about different parts of the movie individually. None of the parts really work, though. Okay, first of all, the whole planet's leaving the Republic thing. When I saw the opening crawl of this movie, I was like, why? Why are they leaving? The events of Phantom Menace do tie into it a little bit, but I didn't get it. You're just kind of left with like, okay, the Republic got greedy, and people want to leave, and it gets really convoluted and strange. It's not what Star Wars is supposed to be about. I had to watch a YouTube video explaining the whole thing. I'll actually link the video down in the description, because it was kind of an interesting video. It doesn't change the fact that while you're watching this movie, you're like, okay, what's the point of all this political stuff? Why are they trying to leave the Republic? Why do we care? Because again, a lot of this movie is standing and talking and sitting and talking, and one person standing, one person sitting. While they're still talking, they're walking and talking. It's a lot of talking, a lot of Jedi not really doing anything, and for some reason now Jar Jar is one of the senators, and we'll get back to Jar Jar later, but now let's talk about Anakin and Padme. George Lucas, when he was describing this movie, said, oh, Attack of the Clones, it's really a love story. Because yeah, you have Anakin and you have Padme, and they're assigned on this mission where Anakin has to protect Padme, but they send him to like Naboo. They're hanging out in a giant open field, and they're on these like romantic, exotic locations, and this is where you get to see Luke and Leia's parents, fall in love. It could be a really good love story. Is it good? No, because it fringes on Twilight level dialogue and acting. You don't buy the fact that these people are in love with each other. You don't buy the fact that Padme has any sort of affection towards Anakin. Anakin's just giving off these creeper vibes towards Padme, just the way that I remember you in my dreams. Please don't look at me like that. Why not? It makes me uncomfortable. Sorry, my lady. So all the Naboo stuff really just unravels quickly because of that terrible pseudo-Shakespearean love dialogue. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the classic sand line, I don't like sand, it's coarse and rough and irritating and it gets everywhere. But then you have other stuff like, I'm haunted by the kiss that you should never have given me. You're in my very soul. And while they're talking, Anakin is like pouring his heart out towards Padme. Padme is wearing all these outfits that slowly get more revealing as the movie goes on. I'm just like, why are you wearing all of this crazy attire and stuff if you don't want any sort of romantic connection with Skywalker? And of course, the action that goes on in the scenes also isn't good. I do think Hayden Christensen, I've come around on Hayden Christensen a little bit. Now, he wasn't good in the movies. Neither was Natalie Portman. Neither was Samuel L. Jackson. There's a lot of people in this movie that just don't work. But it does go back to the dialogue. The dialogue that they're given is not good. And I do think that there are certain scenes where I do kind of, and maybe it's because I've watched Clone Wars now, but I do kind of get some of the unrest that happens with Anakin, but a lot of it just comes across as whiny complaining. And through this whole movie, again, the prequel trilogy should be building up the Anakin-Obi-Wan relationship. And again, throughout this entire movie, just like Phantom Menace, Anakin and Obi-Wan don't have any sort of relationship. They're separate for pretty much the entire movie. You have a little bit at the beginning, you have a little bit at the end, but the rest of the time, Anakin's just like, it's Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan doesn't let me do this, and Master Obi-Wan. Like there's that scene when Anakin and Padme, they go back to Tatooine, and Anakin sees his mom die. Now that is a cool scene when he sees his mom die, because then he looks up, and then he slices down those Tusken Raiders, but then they cut the scene short. That scene should have been longer. The next movie is going to be PG-13 anyways. Why don't just go a little bit further, get that PG-13 rating. When Anakin does get back to the Lars homestead, and he's talking with Padme, and he's saying, I could have saved her, and Padme's like, you're not all powerful. Anakin's like, well, I should be. And it's a hair whiny, but I do think that scene, when they're setting it up, I'm like, okay, this is the kind of stuff that leads Anakin to turn into Darth Vader. But then right in the middle of that scene, he goes back to, it's all Obi-Wan's fault. He's jealous. He's holding me back. I'm just like, okay, you had something going, and I almost see what you were going for there, George Lucas. You had it, you held the scene, and then it just... I believe they even end that scene with a little bit of some hums of the Imperial March in the score. That scene just could have been so much better, and they really wasted it. And while all of that Anakin Padme stuff is going on, Obi-Wan is sent on this wild goose chase for the Jedi Council, trying to figure out this whole assassination attempt. And throughout this goose chase, Obi-Wan goes to Dex's Diner, which is a 50s diner set in Star Wars. And I get George Lucas grew up in the 50s, he was really into like drag racing and race cars, and that's why he made American Graffiti. But I just don't get why there's a 50s diner in Star Wars. It's kind of like Thor Ragnarok. Slight spoilers for Thor Ragnarok. But when Thor is on Sakaar and he's being taken to the Grand Master and they do the whole Willy Wonka thing, they have Pure Imagination playing and they're doing the whole like flashing face thing with all the lights, and I'm like, okay, this is a distant planet. Why are they using music from a kid's movie from the 1970s that was on Earth? But still, then Obi-Wan has to go to some younglings that Yoda's training because he can't figure out where Kamino is, and one of the little younglings has to solve it for him because all the younglings, they're so cute, and cuteness is a thing with Star Wars now. And then he goes to Kamino, and again, just like the Phantom Menace, the worlds that are set up in Attack of the Clones like Kamino and Geonosis, I do think they are cool. However, once we get to Kamino, we meet Jango Fett, who is a bounty hunter, and guess who his son is? Boba Fett. Now, Jake Lloyd gets a lot of crap for the Phantom Menace. I gotta say, the kid that plays Boba Fett is a lot worse. And you guys know, if you saw my Return of the Jedi review, that I'm not even the biggest Boba Fett fan in the world. But I'm sorry, this kid was painful. But Obi-Wan gets to see the creation of this clone army, and again, the creation of the clone army in itself is still just a convoluted mess. The people on Kamino tell him, yeah, this Jedi Master Sifo Dyas commissioned the creation of a clone army. And Obi-Wan says, yeah, Sifo Dyas died almost 10 years ago. But then you're kind of thinking, okay, who is this Sifo Dyas? Because if you created this clone army a while ago, before it was even, you know, a thought in Palpatine's mind, was he like a Jedi Master that went bad, or he knew they were gonna have to be ready for something like this? It kind of started, your mind starts going. Then later, Obi-Wan is talking to Yoda and Mace Windu, and he tells them like, okay, yeah, Sifo Dyas created this clone army, but I thought he was killed before 10 years ago. And I'm thinking, Obi-Wan, you just told them that he was killed almost 10 years ago. Now he was killed before that. So which one is it? And ultimately, who is this Master Sifo Dyas? It doesn't matter. They don't bring it up again. The only reason this would kind of make sense is if like Count Dooku used Sifo Dyas' name as a code name for the creation of the clone army. Because Jango Fett does say like, no, I don't know Sifo Dyas, but I report to this man named Tyrannus. And Count Dooku's Darth name is Darth Tyrannus. So maybe Count Dooku is just using Sifo Dyas' name? That's how I see it, but at the end of the day, I'm just like, why did you need to jump through all those loopholes? There is some cool stuff that goes on with Obi-Wan's chase, like there is a cool fight scene on Kamino between Jango Fett and Obi-Wan. Then you get into this whole asteroid chase between Jango Fett and Obi-Wan, and they're trying to replicate Empire Strikes Back, I guess. And it seems just not that interesting. Those seismic charge booms, that's a cool sound effect, but I do think that the lack of a musical score here was a poor choice. I think they should have put some music in there to heighten the tension. And finally, Obi-Wan ends up on Geonosis, and we finally meet our villain of the movie, who is Count Dooku. Dracula himself is now the villain in Star Wars. But he doesn't really do much. He's just kind of this older gentleman who talks to Obi-Wan. He's like, yes, Qui-Gon was my apprentice. I feel like Count Dooku might have just been a way for them to retcon some of the continuity errors between the prequels and the original trilogy. Because you remember in Empire Strikes Back when Obi-Wan is like, yeah, Luke, go seek out Yoda. He's the Jedi Master who taught me. But then you find out in Phantom Menace, no, it was actually this guy named Qui-Gon Jinn who trained Obi-Wan. So there's this weird continuity thing, but they try to kind of make up for it because they're like, no, because Qui-Gon was trained by a guy named Count Dooku, and Count Dooku was trained by Yoda. But through a chain of events, Yoda really did train Obi-Wan. It's just messy. And while all that's going on, there's this whole unrest in the Senate on Coruscant, and Jar Jar gives emergency powers to Palpatine, basically making Jar Jar responsible for the downfall of the Republic, the fall of the Jedi. I still don't know how I feel about that. I assume George Lucas did that on purpose, giving us more of a reason to hate Jar Jar. The whole scene just still feels really stupid. And then you get to the whole conveyor belt scene, and that looks terrible too. It looks like Anakin just running around in a big green screen environment. On the whole, the effects in Attack of the Clones are a step up from Phantom Menace, but they still look pretty dated. And then finally, we get to this whole Coliseum fight. This is where stuff actually starts to happen that's enjoyable in this movie. But before that, Anakin and Padme are waiting to go out, and Padme has to go, I love you. I truly, deeply love you. The only time you're ever going to hear someone say, I truly, deeply love you, is in some weird pseudo-Shakespearean dialogue movie written and directed by George Lucas. And honestly, I do think that's the problem with George Lucas's writing, is he has this, like, don't show kind of mentality to him. He likes his characters to really spell out what they're saying, really talk it out. I think that's why the prequels have so much boring dialogue in them. Because it's less the actors acting and it's more the script saying, hey, this is happening, or hey, we're gonna go here, or I feel this way about you. But then finally we get into this whole fight on Geonosis, and it's kind of cool for a little bit. Now the CGI in it isn't great, but there are some cool moments in that fight, and then Yoda finally brings in the clone army, and there's a cool fight that goes on outside of the Coliseum. Despite the fact that it really looks like a video game, you have Mace Windu walking around with these clone troopers. Mace Windu being the only real thing in that scene, the rest of it being green screen and CGI. And then we get to this hangar where Count Dooku was trying to get away with the Death Star plans because, yeah, the Geonosians created the Death Star blueprints. Obi-Wan and Anakin try to cut him off, and at least this lightsaber fight, and I can tell George Lucas tried to pull it back from Phantom Menace because people told him the Phantom Menace fight was too choreographed. So I can appreciate that, but still, this fight scene, it's not that interesting, really. Do you have this part where Anakin just cuts the lights for some reason, just no reason, just kind of cuts the lights, and then him and Count Dooku are swinging their lightsabers in their face like some sort of laser light show. Anakin and Obi-Wan both get their butts kicked, and then Yoda comes in, and I like the little force battle that Dooku and Yoda have, which then leads to a lightsaber fight, and the whole thing with Yoda with a lightsaber. When I first saw it, I was like, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. Looking back on it, I'm mixed on the whole thing because it looks cool. It's just got a lot of problems to it. One, Yoda was always the guy who didn't need a lightsaber. He was just so powerful, he didn't need one. Now all of a sudden, he's fighting with a lightsaber. Okay, what, it goes against Star Wars lore, but whatever. But then why is Yoda able to do all these flips and barrel rolls and somersaults and all that stuff when he usually needs a cane to walk? Yeah, it's the Force that lets him do that. But to quote Han Solo, that's not how the Force works. So at the end of the day, the Clone Wars have begun, and this huge CGI clone army, that's another thing, is there was no real clone troopers made for this movie. It was all CGI. The clones are going off into battle. Palpatine has this like smirk on his face like, yeah. The Imperial March kind of plays over that whole clone trooper scene, like it's hinting at some darkness that's going to come. And then Anakin and Padme get married on Naboo, and that's the end of our movie. I think the biggest sin that Attack of the Clones commits is that the movie is just boring. Because the romantic stuff with Anakin and Padme is not interesting. The stuff with Obi-Wan isn't that interesting. It's probably the most interesting thing in this movie, but a lot of it kind of feels like they were wasting your time because of a lot of it is just stuff that you already know and you're waiting for Obi-Wan to figure it out. And then the stuff in the Senate, also just boring. That last half hour with the Coliseum thing and the Battle of Geonosis and the lightsaber stuff has its interesting moments, but it takes almost 2 hours to get there, and you feel like a lot of it was just a waste of time. Parts I do enjoy about Attack of the Clones, again, I like the worlds of Kamino and Geonosis. I like going back to Tatooine. I like getting to see the Lars homestead again, and I think that setting a movie before the Clone Wars would have been a good episode 1 to start off this whole prequel trilogy. I think that it could have started Anakin's slow decline towards the dark side. It could have started that rift between Anakin and Obi-Wan. But Anakin and Obi-Wan have no relationship. Anakin is just a whiny brat throughout the entire movie. More bad kid actors, more bad CGI, the Jedi not doing anything. They finally actually do something at the end of the movie. So I'll give the movie that. There was a cool Jedi throwdown at the end of the movie. That's cool. I always flip-flop between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Which one do I hate more? Right now, I would say Attack of the Clones is my least favorite Star Wars movie. It's not good. It's terrible. You don't have to watch it. It's bad. Just watch the Clone Wars TV show. It's way better. Oh, I made it. I talked about Attack of the Clones. It's done. So Attack of the Clones. Have you guys seen this movie? What do you think about it? Whatever you think about this movie, let me know down in the comments. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys liked it, you can click subscribe and check out some of my other videos. And I'll catch you guys next time.